I am Stanley, 71 years old and a retired mechanic. At least, that is what my family thinks. While changing my smoke detector battery last Tuesday, I found a hidden camera inside pointed directly at my bedroom door. I did not panic. I simply put the cover back on and said nothing. 5 days later, my son asked me a question about something he could not possibly have known unless he was watching me. Instead of confronting him, I decided to play his game. Let me tell you how I turned the tables on the people who tried to bury me alive. Before I continue, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you believe greed always reveals a person's true face. The annoying chirp of the smoke detector pierced the silence of my bedroom at 2 in the morning. It was that persistent, high-pitched beep that forces you out of a deep sleep. I dragged myself out of bed, my joints stiff from the cold night air, and grabbed my old aluminum step stool from the hallway closet. I positioned it right under the detector, climbed up, and twisted the plastic cover off, expecting to swap out a dying 9-volt battery. Instead, my fingers brushed against a tangle of unfamiliar wires. I grabbed my flashlight from the nightstand and shined the beam into the small cavity. Nestled perfectly between the battery slot and the plastic casing was a tiny black lens, no larger than the head of a pin, accompanied by a steadily blinking red light. It was meticulously wired directly into the detector's main power supply, angled to capture every inch of my bed and the bedroom door. My heart hammered against my ribs, echoing in the quiet room. A sudden violent chill crept over my skin. Someone had been in my house. Someone had climbed a ladder, unscrewed this device, and planted a spying eye right where I sleep. My first instinct, fueled by a surge of violation and anger, was to rip the tiny device out of the ceiling, crush it under my heel, and call the police. But 40 years of working with complex industrial machinery had taught me one unshakable rule. When you find a loose wire, you do not just pull it. You trace it back to the source. I forced my breathing to slow down. I carefully snapped the plastic cover back into place, making sure the lens aligned perfectly with the vent holes just as I had found it. I wiped my fingerprints off the rim with my shirt sleeve, put the step stool away, and climbed back into bed. I laid there in the dark for hours, staring at the ceiling, feeling the invisible, suffocating weight of being watched. I ran through a list of enemies, old business rivals, anyone who might want to spy on an old man. The truth, however, was about to walk right through my front door. 5 days later, the trap snapped shut. My son Jared and his wife Natalie came over for our usual Sunday dinner. Jared sat across from me at the dining table, swirling his wine glass, looking every bit the successful financial consultant in his tailored suit and expensive watch. Natalie was beside him, busy picking at her roasted chicken, her perfectly manicured nails tapping a restless rhythm against the porcelain plate. The conversation was strained, filled with empty pleasantries about the weather and their busy schedules. I watched them closely, searching for any sign of guilt, any nervous tick. Then Jared leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. His tone was casually laced with what sounded like genuine concern. "Hey, Dad," he said smoothly. "Where is that old leather-bound notebook you usually keep on your nightstand? I think you should lock it in the safe. It is not good to leave important things lying around where they could get lost." The air in the dining room instantly grew thick and heavy. I froze my fork, hovering halfway to my mouth. That leather notebook contained my private financial logs and personal reflections. I had kept it locked in the bottom drawer of my heavy oak desk for years. I had only taken it out for exactly 10 minutes the night before. I had sat on the edge of my bed, completely alone behind closed doors, to review some numbers before putting it right back into the locked drawer. There was absolutely no physical way Jared could have known about that notebook. He had not been in my house for a week. He had not been in my bedroom, unless he saw me holding it through the lens hidden in my ceiling. I looked at my son, truly looking at him for the first time in years. His eyes were perfectly calm, masking the catastrophic slip he had just made. Natalie stopped tapping her nails and watched me intently, like a predator studying wounded prey. The betrayal hit me so hard it felt like a physical blow to the chest. My own flesh and blood. The boy I had taught to ride a bike, the son I had put through college, was spying on me in my most vulnerable moments. I forced a confused smile, letting my shoulders slump just a fraction to mimic the tired, fragile old man he expected me to be. "What notebook?" "Jared," I asked, keeping my voice intentionally shaky. "I do not know what you are talking about. I have not used a notebook in years." Natalie exchanged a swift, knowing glance with Jared. It was a fleeting look, but to a father who knew his son, it carried volumes of sinister intent. "See," Jared said, his voice dripping with fake sickening sympathy. "This is exactly what we were talking about, Dad. Your memory is slipping. Yesterday you could not find your car keys, and now you are forgetting your own belongings. You are getting dangerously forgetful. It is not safe for you to be alone managing a house like this." My blood ran ice cold, but I kept my hands perfectly steady under the table. The keys. They had come over yesterday afternoon for a brief visit. After they left, my keys had mysteriously vanished from the hook by the front door, only to reappear in the laundry room sink 2 hours later. I had spent the entire afternoon searching for them, feeling a creeping sense of panic that my mind was finally failing me. Now the terrifying reality settled over me like a suffocating blanket. They were not just spying on me. They were actively orchestrating a campaign to make me look insane. They were gaslighting me, manipulating my environment to convince me and anyone else who would listen that I was suffering from severe dementia. Why go to such extreme criminal lengths? The answer was painfully obvious. Greed. A man deemed mentally incompetent by a medical professional, and a judge loses all legal control of his assets. The state would hand control directly to his next of kin. To Jared. He thought I was just a retired mechanic with a paid-off house and a decent pension. He wanted this property probably to liquidate it and cover the massive lifestyle expenses Natalie constantly demanded. He had absolutely no idea about the blind trust. He did not know that 20 years ago I patented an industrial piston core that revolutionized heavy machinery, generating millions in royalties every single year. I lived simply because I valued peace over luxury. But Jared and Natalie only saw an old, confused man standing between them and a piece of real estate they felt entitled to. I let out a heavy, defeated sigh, rubbing my temples, as if a headache was coming on, playing the part of a broken father to absolute perfection. "Maybe you are right, son," I murmured, staring blankly at my half-eaten chicken. "Maybe my mind is just getting old. I am so tired lately." Jared reached across the table and patted my hand, a gesture so devoid of real warmth it made my skin crawl. Do not worry, Dad. We are here for you. We will figure this out together." They left shortly after, visibly satisfied that their psychological poison was taking root. The moment the front door clicked shut, and I heard their car engine fade down the street. The fragile, confused old man vanished completely. I stood up, my spine straight, the lingering sadness replaced by a cold, calculating fury. I walked straight to my bedroom and stood directly under the smoke detector. I looked up at the tiny black gap in the plastic, offering the hidden lens a slow, deliberate smile. They wanted to play a game of shadows. They wanted to strip away my dignity and my freedom for a quick payday. Fine. I would give them a performance they would never forget. I walked out of the camera's narrow view, pulled out an unregistered burner phone I kept hidden in my garage toolbox, and dialed a number I had not used in a very long time. "Carter," I said, when the gruff, familiar voice answered on the other end. "I need your particular set of skills tonight. My family thinks I am going crazy, and I am about to prove them absolutely right." Carter did not ask whether I was sure. That was one reason I had called him. He had spent years doing corporate security work before opening a private investigations office, and he understood that panic destroyed evidence faster than fire. He only asked 3 questions. Was the camera still powered? Had I touched anything besides the smoke detector cover? Did Jared still have a key to the house when I told him yes to the first and third and no to the second? His voice sharpened. Do not unplug anything. Do not change the locks. And do not act different tomorrow. I will be there at 5:30 in the morning. If they are watching, we need them to believe the room is still theirs. At 5:28, a white utility van rolled into the alley behind my garage with no company name on the side. Carter stepped out, wearing work boots, gray coveralls, and a tool belt that made him look like an electrician who had gotten lost before sunrise. He was 55 now, broader through the shoulders than I remembered, with the same economical way of moving. We had met 15 years earlier after one of the companies licensing my piston design suffered an internal theft. Carter had traced the leak without making a single accusation until he already possessed every hard drive image and access log he needed. That morning he entered through the garage because the front door sat inside the field of view of the living room camera I did not yet know existed. I led him to the breaker panel and showed him the circuit feeding the bedroom detector. I used a handheld scanner first, sweeping the hallway, then the bedroom, moving slowly enough that I could hear the faint click of each button beneath his thumb. The scanner chirped near the ceiling. Carter looked up at the detector, then at me. That unit is transmitting wirelessly, he whispered. It is not just storing video, somebody can watch live. He opened a padded case and removed a small receiver no larger than a deck of cards. Within minutes, a grainy image appeared on its screen. My own bed. My own door. The timestamp was current. Seeing my private room reduced to a little moving rectangle made the betrayal feel even uglier than when I had first found the lens. Carter did not remove it. Instead, he mapped its signal, then walked the house. The first additional transmitter was hidden inside a decorative clock on the living room shelf aimed at the sofa and front entrance. The second was inside this kitchen range hood angled toward the table where I sorted mail and opened bills. The third had been drilled through the back of a wooden pencil cup on my office desk, positioned so that anyone watching could see the papers in my hands. 4 cameras. Bedroom, living room, kitchen, office. They had not been checking on an old man. They had built a surveillance net around my life. I expected rage to hit me. Instead, I felt something much colder. 4 devices meant planning. Somebody had chosen angles, power sources, and hiding places. Somebody had spent enough time in my home to install them without rushing. Jared had not made one desperate mistake. He had crossed my threshold repeatedly and treated my house like a target. Carter photographed each device in place, measured the angles, captured the radio-identified copies of the live feeds. Then he said the most important thing. We do not touch their cameras. We put ours where theirs cannot see them. His cameras were not the cheap pinhole units Jared had planted. Carter installed 2 encrypted devices inside the attic vents, one behind a bookshelf bracket, and one above the kitchen doorway, inside an old motion sensor that had not worked in years. His lenses did not point at me. They pointed at the hidden cameras, the desk, the safe, and the entrances someone would have to use to reach them. He also placed tiny contact sensors on the office window, the back door, and the garage entry. If someone came in, we would know how, when, and what they touched. By 7:15, the house looked exactly as it had before he arrived. Before leaving, Carter handed me a small black remote. One button marked every stream with a timestamp. Another saved the previous 10 minutes of audio and video to an encrypted drive in his van and to a second location I did not ask about. The third sent him a silent alert. Do not try to be clever for the camera every minute, he warned. People who fake dementia too hard look fake. Give them small things. Forget a cup. Misplace a newspaper. Repeat a question once. Let them build the story they already want to believe. The best trap is the one your target thinks he designed. I spent that morning learning how humiliating acting week could be. At breakfast, I poured orange juice into a coffee mug, stared at it for several seconds, then muttered loud enough for the kitchen camera to hear that I could not remember where the glasses were. I left my reading glasses in the refrigerator beside the butter. I carried yesterday's newspaper into the living room and asked an empty room what day it was. None of it was dramatic. That was the point. Jared did not need a spectacular breakdown. He needed ordinary pieces he could arrange into a picture of decline. At 11 he called. His voice carried the cautious brightness of a man testing a bridge. "Dad, how are you feeling today?" "Fine," I said, then paused as if searching for the word. "I made eggs. Or maybe that was yesterday. I am not sure." He did not answer for half a second, and that half second told me he was smiling. "Did you take your medication?" he asked. I told him I thought so. Then I deliberately asked whether Natalie was still coming to dinner, even though we had eaten together the night before. Jared corrected me gently, almost tenderly. "We were there yesterday, Dad. Remember," he told me not to worry. Behind every soft word I could hear the sound of a file being filled. After the call, I walked into my office and opened the bottom drawer of my desk. The real leather notebook stayed locked inside. I took out a yellow legal pad and wrote 4 numbers in thick block print: 4197. Underneath I wrote safe code, house papers. I stared at the note as though I had forgotten why I had made it, then left it half covered by a utility bill in direct view of the pencil cup camera. The code belonged to nothing. The safe behind the framed photograph in my office had been emptied years ago. I used it only as a decoy because anyone greedy enough to search my house would believe a 71-year-old man still kept deeds and account documents in steel. I let the note sit there all afternoon. Around 3, Jared called again. He did not mention my supposed confusion this time. He asked whether I planned to go anywhere the next morning. The question was dressed as concern about the weather. "There might be ice on the sidewalks," he said. "Maybe stay home." I told him I was thinking of walking to the pharmacy after breakfast. He suggested I go to the park instead because fresh air would be good for me. I nearly laughed. I was not arranging my health. He was arranging an empty house. That evening, Carter called from a number that did not appear on my phone screen. The camera feeds had been accessed 7 times since morning each session from the same encrypted relay. We could not prove who held the viewing device yet, but he had enough network information to preserve the pattern. More importantly, someone had zoomed the office feed twice after I left the fake safe code visible. "They took the bait," he said. "Tomorrow, you walk exactly when you said you would. Do not circle back. I will pick you up 2 streets away." At 9, the next morning, I put on my old canvas jacket and made sure the kitchen camera could see me searching for my wallet in 3 different drawers. I found it in the first drawer, ignored it, checked 2 more, then returned and acted surprised. I spoke to myself about taking a long walk because I had been cooped up too much. Then I left by the front door, locked it carefully, and headed toward the park. From the lonely old man trying to keep his head clear, inside my coat, Carter's remote pressed against my ribs like a second heartbeat. His van waited beyond the church parking lot. I climbed in through the side door and found 3 monitors glowing in the dim interior. One showed my driveway, one showed the office, one cycled through the other rooms. Carter had a thermos of coffee between his knees and a pair of headphones resting around his neck. Nothing happened for 11 minutes. Then a dark sedan rolled past my house, once continued to the corner, and returned. Natalie was driving. She parked 1 house down, stayed behind the wheel for nearly a minute, then came up my side path instead of the front walk. She did not knock. She removed a key from her purse and opened the kitchen door. Carter glanced at me. "Did you give her that key?" "Never. Jared had one for emergencies." The answer sat between us. Either he had copied it, or he had handed his own key to her. Natalie entered carrying thin black gloves and a large leather tote. There was no hesitation in her movement. She had been inside my home without permission before. The kitchen camera Jared had installed captured only part of her body, but Carter's lens above the doorway caught everything. Natalie walked straight to the office. She did not search random drawers or call my name. She lifted the utility bill, photographed the note with the false code, and went to the framed photograph hiding the safe. She entered 4197. The lock clicked open. For an instant, satisfaction transformed her face. Then she saw the empty interior. She reached inside as if the documents might be pressed flat against the back. She removed the small metal shelf and felt along the seams. Nothing. Her controlled expression disappeared. She searched the desk next, pulling open drawers and rifling through folders. When she found only tax receipts, repair manuals, and old photographs, she slammed a drawer hard enough to shake the camera. Then she took out her phone and called Jared. We could hear only her first. "Where is it?" she demanded. "No, the code worked. The safe is empty. I am telling you, empty." She paced once across the office, then lowered her voice. "The old man does not keep the deed here. He does not keep anything here. You said he was hiding it in the office." Carter adjusted the audio gain. Natalie listened, then hissed the sentence that changed the shape of the entire case. "The black market lenders are going to come for you, Jared. They already gave you the extension. If we cannot put the house up, what exactly do you think they are going to take next?" I felt the muscles in my jaw lock. Until that moment, I had assumed greed meant the house, my savings, and whatever inheritance Jared imagined existed. Debt was different. Debt created urgency, and urgency made people reckless. Natalie continued. "What your crypto account says. It is gone. The money is gone. 1.5 million does not magically come back because you stare at a chart." There was a pause. Then she added, "We need his signature before they start showing up at our door." Carter hit the save marker. The video duplicated instantly. Natalie stayed another 6 minutes. She photographed my insurance folder, checked behind the filing cabinet, and even opened the small toolbox beneath my workbench. Before leaving, she replaced the fake code exactly where she had found it and wiped the safe keypad with a tissue. She believed she had entered and exited invisibly. She even locked the kitchen door behind her. The moment her car turned the corner, Carter leaned back in his seat. 1.5 million, he said. I asked whether he had heard rumors before. He had heard more than rumors. When I called him the previous night, he had started pulling lawful public records, corporate filings, civil claims, and financial traces connected to Jared's consulting business. Jared had presented himself for years as a disciplined advisor who helped wealthy clients preserve capital. In reality, his firm had been shrinking. 2 major clients had sued over failed speculative investments. The suits had settled quietly, but the timing lined up with a much larger problem. According to Carter, Jared had begun moving his own money into highly leveraged cryptocurrency positions 18 months earlier. When the market turned against him, he doubled down. When that failed, he borrowed through private lenders that did not operate like banks. Some loans ran through shell companies. Others had no public paper trail at all. Carter had found vehicle liens, a second mortgage on Jared's condo, and a judgment from a lender that had been withdrawn days before enforcement. Somebody had paid enough to delay it, but not enough to erase the debt. The number Natalie said had matched Carter's estimate almost perfectly, about $1.5 million. Why would he think my house could solve that, I asked. Carter pulled up county property records. My home, bought decades earlier in a neighborhood that had since become expensive, looked as though it belonged to me free and clear. To anyone checking the public record quickly, it appeared to be an elderly man's most valuable asset. Jared believed the house was worth just under $900,000. Add the $80,000 he knew I kept at the local bank, and whatever he imagined was in my retirement accounts, and he probably thought stripping me of control could buy him time. He still did not know the house was not mine in the way he thought. Years ago, after my wife died, Samantha had reorganized my estate. The property had been transferred into a holding company owned by the Blind Trust, while I retained the lifetime right to live there. The county record showed the company name in a way Jared had apparently never examined carefully. He saw my address, my occupancy, and decades of family memory, and assumed ownership. That assumption was going to matter later. For now, Carter advised me to let him keep making it. We returned to the house after Natalie was gone. I did not touch the safe immediately. Carter photographed everything before I entered the office. We documented the shifted folders, the glove marks visible under an angled light, and the time on the door sensor. Then I put the office back exactly as Natalie had left it. The fake code remained on the desk. If Jared checked the camera feed, he would see nothing unusual. He would think his wife had entered failed and escaped without leaving a trace. That afternoon, Jared arrived unannounced. I was in the kitchen stirring soup when he let himself in with his key. He wore a concerned expression, but the skin beneath his eyes looked gray from lack of sleep. "Dad." "I was nearby," he said. "Thought I would check on you." I pretended to be startled by his presence. Then I asked whether I had invited him. He said no and guided me toward a chair as though I might fall. His questions came casually. Had I been reviewing any property papers? Had I considered simplifying my finances? Did I still know where the deed to the house was? I stared at him and let my face go blank. "Deed," I said. "I thought the bank kept that." Jared tried to correct me, then stopped. Too much knowledge would reveal too much interest. Instead, he patted my shoulder and told me not to worry about paperwork. He could help with all of that when the time came. Then he noticed my legal pad through the office doorway. For one fraction of a second, his eyes shifted toward it. He looked away immediately, but I saw the calculation. He already knew the safe had been empty. Now he needed a new path. He asked whether I had changed my will recently. I told him I did not remember having a will at all. His relief was so small another person might have missed it. I had spent 40 years listening to machines. Tiny changes in rhythm tell you where the failure begins. Before leaving, Jared took my car keys off the counter and handed them to me even though I had not asked for them. "Keep these in one place, Dad," he said. "You do not want to lose them again." I thanked him. After the door shut, I looked down. The ring held my car key, but the small brass key to my medicine cabinet was missing. That was not an accident. He had come to the house looking for more than property papers. I pressed Carter's remote and marked the footage. The trap had produced the first hard evidence of illegal entry motive and financial desperation. It had also shown me something worse. Jared was no longer merely gathering a story about my memory. He was beginning to control the physical details of my daily life. A missing medicine cabinet key might have seemed trivial before the camera. Now it felt like a warning. That night, I did not sleep in my bedroom. I lay on the living room sofa where Jared's camera could see me toss and turn, then get up twice to drink water. At 4 in the morning, I deliberately stood beneath the decorative clock and whispered that I felt tired all the time. I wanted whoever was watching to believe the plan was working. What I did not know yet was that Jared had already decided forgetfulness was not enough. If he wanted a judge to see a helpless old man, he intended to manufacture one. The next morning, the medicine cabinet told me what the missing key had been for. My weekly pill organizer said exactly where I kept it, but the tablets in the Tuesday and Wednesday compartments looked wrong. My blood pressure medication was small white and scored across the center. These pills were slightly thicker and carried a faint blue marking on one side. Anyone who did not take the same prescription every morning might never have noticed. I did because mechanics survive by noticing when a part does not belong. I did not swallow one. I transferred 2 tablets into a clean plastic sample envelope Carter had left with me, photographed the organizer, and replaced the compartment with genuine medication from a sealed refill I kept in the garage. Then I took the substituted pill at the kitchen table where Jared's camera could see me. I held it to my lips, pretended to swallow, and washed it down with coffee. The tablet stayed hidden beneath my tongue until I reached the bathroom. Within an hour, Jared called to ask how I felt. He had never called an hour after breakfast in his life. I told him I was sleepy. He asked whether I had taken my blood pressure medicine. I said I thought so. There was warmth in his voice when he said, "Good. Maybe you should rest today." I stared at the receiver after he hung up. A father learns a son's voice before the son learns language. I knew when Jared had been frightened as a boy, when he had lied as a teenager, when he had hidden disappointment as a grown man. This tone was expectation. Carter collected the sample before noon. He did not speculate. He delivered it to an independent laboratory through a chain of custody service and made sure the receipt identified only the sample number, not our theory. While we waited for results, I visited an independent physician outside Jared's network. I had chosen the clinic because nobody there knew my family. I told the doctor I believed someone might be tampering with my medication and that I wanted a complete baseline evaluation of my physical and cognitive health. The examination took most of the afternoon. Blood pressure, blood work, neurological screening, memory exercises, reasoning questions, medication review. I answered everything normally. I remembered the words I was asked to remember. I balanced my checkbook exercise to the penny. I drew the clock correctly and named the date, the president, the city, and the route I had driven to get there. The doctor found no sign of dementia, delirium, or impaired judgment. More important than any single test, the clinic documented that I had sought help voluntarily and understood exactly why I was there. When the physician asked whether I felt safe at home, I told the truth without giving more than necessary. I said I had reason to believe a family member was interfering with medication and personal property. The doctor documented the statement and advised me to keep all medications secured and to contact law enforcement if I believed I was in immediate danger. I asked for certified copies of the record. I left with them sealed in an envelope Carter later scanned into our evidence file. The laboratory result came the next day. The substituted tablet was a sedating antihistamine commonly used as a sleep aid, not my prescribed blood pressure medication. In an older person, repeated doses could cause drowsiness, slowed reaction time, confusion, and falls. Carter read the report twice before setting it on my table. "They are trying to create symptoms," he said. I corrected him. "No. They are trying to create witnesses to symptoms." That distinction mattered. If I merely became sleepy inside my house, there was no audience. Jared needed neighbors, store clerks, doctors, anyone who could later say I had seemed disoriented. So I gave him a controlled version of what he wanted. The following afternoon, I shuffled to my mailbox wearing slippers and a coat buttoned unevenly. I paused near the curb, rubbed my forehead, and returned inside. I made sure not to step into traffic or expose myself to actual harm. The performance lasted less than 2 minutes. That evening, Jared called and said a neighbor had mentioned I looked confused. I was building a record faster now. He began dropping by without warning. Sometimes Natalie came. They spoke slowly to me, repeating simple questions as if I were a child. Jared started labeling drawers with pieces of masking tape. Forks, towels, medicine. Natalie taped a printed emergency number beside the phone, even though I had used this longer than she had known my son. Every degrading gesture was staged for their cameras and perhaps for future photographs. I let them do it. I even thanked Natalie when she labeled my refrigerator shelves. She smiled and told me organization would reduce my anxiety. Her handbag stayed on the kitchen chair. Carter's overhead camera captured her hand entering my medicine cabinet, while Jared distracted me in the living room with a stack of insurance brochures. She removed the legitimate pills I had placed there and substituted another set from a plastic bag. This time, we had the act itself on video. The next escalation came through my car keys. I left them on the hook by the front door before Jared and Natalie visited on Thursday. During the visit, Jared walked to the kitchen for water. The keys disappeared. 20 minutes after they left, I acted frantic for the living room camera, opening drawers and checking my coat pockets. Then I called Jared and told him I could not find them. He returned with Natalie less than an hour later. They joined the search, moving through rooms they had already searched privately for documents. Natalie opened the trash cabinet beneath the kitchen sink and gasped. "Stanley," she said, "look." My keys lay on top of a clean garbage bag, placed so neatly they could not have fallen there. Jared gave me a look filled with manufactured heartbreak. "Dad, you must have thrown them away without realizing it." I sat down hard at the kitchen table and covered my face with both hands. The gesture was partly performance and partly grief. There are moments when betrayal becomes too precise to remain abstract. Those keys had been the first thing I placed into Jared's palm when he turned 16. I had taught him how to drive in an empty school parking lot, my hand hovering near the emergency brake, while he learned to judge the distance between the hood and the painted lines. Now he was using keys to teach strangers that his father could no longer be trusted. I let my shoulders shake. I told him I was scared. Jared crouched beside me and said the sentence he had been waiting to say. "Dad, maybe it is time we talk to someone professionally. Not because anything is wrong, but because we need a baseline." Natalie added that a family doctor could come to the house so I would not be stressed by a clinic. I looked at them through wet eyes and nodded. After they left, Carter called. He had watched the entire scene from a secure feed. The video showed Jared removing the keys from the hook and slipping them into his jacket. It also showed Natalie placing them in the trash while he kept me occupied in the hallway. We now had direct evidence of environmental manipulation, not merely suspicion. Carter wanted to take everything to police immediately. I told him not yet. He did not like that answer. Stanley, medication tampering crosses a line. I know. Then why wait? Because Jared believes he is close. If we stop him now, he will claim family concern and bad judgment. If he files for control over me using fabricated medical evidence, the motive and conspiracy become impossible to explain away. Carter was silent for a few seconds. Then he said, "You spent too many years repairing machines. You think everything can be run until the failure becomes obvious. Sometimes parts explode." I told him I understood. That was why we were controlling what reached me and recording everything. We changed the safety conditions that night. My real medication moved to Carter's locked case, and he delivered each day's dose separately. Food and drinks stayed in sealed containers when Jared or Natalie were present. I stopped driving except when Carter transported me because I did not want them creating an accident and calling it decline. Every staged symptom happened inside limits we chose. The more they believed I was losing control, the more tightly I controlled the environment around them. 3 days later, Jared brought the doctor. The man arrived carrying a black medical bag and wearing a white coat over street clothes. He introduced himself only by his last name and said Jared had asked him to perform a friendly cognitive screening. No clinic identification hung from his coat. No nurse came with him. He did not ask for my insurance card or provide a privacy notice. Carter had warned me that fraudulent medical paperwork often looked convincing because people focus on the coat and the clipboard instead of credentials. I acted embarrassed. Jared guided the man into the living room and told me not to worry. Natalie sat near the window with her phone turned face down on her knee. The doctor began with orientation questions. "What year is it?" I gave the previous year. "What month?" I said March, though it was November. "Who is the current president?" I named the wrong one. Jared's face remained solemn, but his foot bounced with excitement beneath the chair. The doctor gave me 3 words to remember: apple, train, penny. I repeated apple, tree, nickel. He asked me to count backward by 7s. I deliberately made 2 errors. He asked me to draw a clock showing 10 past 11. I placed both hands near 12. Each wrong answer felt grotesque, because I knew exactly what I was doing, yet the humiliation served a purpose. I needed Jared to believe his evidence had become complete. The doctor asked about my finances. Jared answered before I could. Dad has always handled his own money, but lately he forgets bills. I looked toward him as if confused. Which bills? I asked. Jared said I had recently left a utility payment unopened for 2 weeks. It was a lie. Carter had the paid receipt. The doctor wrote it down without verifying anything. He then asked whether I trusted Jared to help manage my affairs. I stared at my son for a long moment and said, I suppose he is all I have. That answer almost broke something in Jared's face. For one instant, guilt appeared. Then Natalie shifted in her chair and the look vanished. The doctor closed his folder and announced that my performance suggested significant cognitive impairment, requiring further supervision. He did not say probable, possible, or preliminary. He spoke as if a 20-minute living room quiz had established a diagnosis. I thanked him and asked whether I could use the bathroom. Before the visit, Carter had sewn a recording device into the inner seam of my cardigan. It captured every word in the room. When I left, I did not go to the bathroom. I stepped into the hallway and stood just beyond the doorway, where they thought I could not hear clearly. Jared lowered his voice. Is that enough? The doctor replied that the screening alone was weak, but combined with family statements and examples of dangerous behavior, it could support an emergency petition. Natalie asked how quickly they could get temporary authority. The doctor said that depended on the court and the wording of his letter. Jared then asked the question we needed. How much more do you want for the letter to say he cannot manage finances or medical decisions? There was a pause. Then the doctor named an amount. 5,000, now 5,000 after the temporary order. Natalie complained that they had already paid him 3. He replied that he was taking risk and that the report had to be stronger than what he had observed. Jared said, fine. Write that he is a danger to himself and that the decline has accelerated. We will handle the witnesses. My fingers tightened around the hallway railing. Carter's recorder captured the entire negotiation. I returned to the living room wearing the same vacant expression I had carried out. Nobody looked alarmed. The doctor gave Jared a folded sheet and told him to schedule additional assessment after the court filing. Jared slipped the paper into a folder before I could supposedly understand what it was. When the doctor left, Natalie hugged me. Her perfume turned my stomach. She told me they were going to take care of everything. Jared said I would never have to worry about bills or decisions again. I asked if that meant he would come visit more often. His eyes dropped. Of course, Dad, he said. I smiled like a relieved old man. The front door closed behind them at 4:47. Carter entered through the garage at 4:54. He removed the recorder from my cardigan and copied the file before either of us spoke. Then he played the hallway section through a small speaker. Hearing Jared bargain over the price of my incompetence made the room feel smaller. I had known what he was doing. Knowing did not make his voice easier to hear. Carter stopped the playback. We have enough to bury that doctor, he said. I told him to preserve it, not use it yet. He asked whether I planned to let Jared actually file. Yes. Carter shook his head, but he understood the strategy. A private lie inside my house was one thing. A lie sworn into a court filing was another. The independent physician I had seen earlier repeated my cognitive testing the following morning and documented results, consistent with the first exam: intact memory, judgment, attention, and financial reasoning. The laboratory issued a final signed report, confirming the substituted sedative. Carter prepared a timeline linking every camera incident with Jared's calls and visits. We were not building an emotional argument. We were building sequence, surveillance, staging, medication, tampering, manufactured symptoms, purchased opinion, legal filing. Jared accelerated on cue. He called twice that week to ask me questions about old family events, pretending to test my memory. I intentionally missed details that he knew I had once remembered easily. Then I answered one question perfectly that he expected me to miss. The inconsistency made him nervous. I could hear papers shifting on his end. He asked whether anyone had been visiting me. I said no, although Carter had been in and out through the garage almost daily. Jared needed to believe I had no ally. Natalie began pushing the idea of assisted living. Glossy brochures showing quiet rooms, landscaped courtyards, and smiling gray-haired couples holding coffee cups. She circled one facility in red pen and said it would be safer than a big house. I asked whether they allowed tools because I still liked repairing things. She said tools might be dangerous for someone in my condition. My condition. The phrase had become a piece of property to them, something they owned because they repeated it often enough. I noticed another shift. They no longer asked where the deed was. They spoke as if the house would soon be theirs to control. Jared walked through the living room one afternoon, estimating aloud where a wall could be removed to open the kitchen. Natalie complained about my old cabinets and said the property would need work before resale. They believed the court process was a formality. Their desperation over the debt had turned confidence into entitlement. On Friday, Carter showed me a courthouse docket entry on his tablet. Jared had filed a petition seeking temporary conservatorship over my medical and financial decisions. The petition cited memory loss medication, mismanagement, dangerous driving, misplaced property confusion over dates, and an evaluation by a physician who claimed I lacked capacity. Jared requested emergency authority because, according to his sworn statement, I was at immediate risk of dissipating assets and harming myself. I read the page twice. At the bottom sat my son's signature beneath a declaration that the information was true to the best of his knowledge. He had transformed every staged act, every item he moved, every pill they replaced, and every answer I had intentionally missed into a legal weapon. The document should have frightened me. Instead, it clarified the board. Carter asked what came next. I folded a printed copy of the petition and slid it into the same drawer that held my leather notebook. Next, I said, I stop being only the man they think they are stealing from. It is time Jared learns he never understood what he was trying to take. Samantha's office occupied the top floor of a narrow brick building downtown, 3 blocks from the courthouse where Jared had filed his petition. I entered through a service garage beneath the building and took a private elevator because we could not risk anyone connecting me to her before we were ready. Samantha was 45, precise in everything from her tailored charcoal suit to the way she arranged documents in parallel lines across a conference table. She had managed the legal structure around my assets for 11 years and had never once asked why I still changed my own oil. She listened without interrupting, while Carter played the recordings and showed the videos, Natalie opening the safe, Jared removing my keys, Natalie replacing medication, the bought doctor negotiating his fee. Finally, Samantha read the conservatorship petition. Her face changed only once when she reached the allegation that I had become unable to understand ordinary financial transactions. She looked up. He actually swore to this, yes. Then he has just made our job easier. She pulled a thick file from a locked cabinet. The cover bore the name of a holding company Jared had probably seen in county records without recognizing. Beneath it sat trust documents, licensing agreements, royalty statements, and corporate minutes. To Jared, I had spent my life turning wrenches and rebuilding engines. That part was true. What he had never understood was that mechanics do not merely repair machines. The best ones solve problems engineers sometimes miss. 20 years earlier, while contracting on heavy industrial and aviation support equipment, I had designed a piston core using a heat-resistant alloy geometry that dramatically reduced wear under high load. I had built the first prototype after hours in a rented machine shop because the commercial parts kept failing on a test rig. A manufacturer licensed the design, then another did. The patent expanded into international licensing, and the royalties multiplied faster than I knew what to do with them. My late wife had been the first person to insist we hide the wealth from our lifestyle instead of letting it reshape us. We paid off the house, replaced nothing that still worked, and kept friends who had known us before the checks became large. When she died, I moved the patent rights and investment proceeds into a blind trust, administered through Samantha's firm. I did not personally select most investments. I received controlled distributions and lived on a fraction of them. The trust had grown into the tens of millions. Jared knew none of that. I had once considered telling him when he turned 30. Then he began treating money as proof of status, buying things before he could afford them, and measuring successful people by what they displayed. I postponed the conversation. Later, when Natalie entered his life and every family gathering became a catalog of what other people owned, I decided silence was safer. I had hoped ignorance would protect him from greed. It had only forced his greed to work with smaller numbers. Samantha opened a current statement. The trust held multiple investment accounts, licensing income, commercial property interests, and cash reserves. My house sat inside the structure through the holding company. The $80,000 at my neighborhood bank was almost comically small by comparison. I had kept that account outside the main trust for ordinary expenses because I liked walking into a branch where people knew me as Stanley, the retired mechanic. That $80,000 could now serve another purpose. Samantha proposed freezing it preemptively. I told her not yet. Jared believed the account was accessible. If he attempted to use fraudulent incapacity documents to seize it, the bank interaction would create another independent witness and another paper trail. She considered the risk, then agreed on one condition. The bank's legal department would be quietly alerted through counsel, so no funds could leave without enhanced verification. To Jared, the account would appear normal until he tried to take it. We also prepared for the conservatorship petition. Samantha filed a limited appearance challenging the emergency request and submitted my independent medical records under seal. She did not reveal the trust. She did not reveal the full surveillance evidence. She only gave the court enough to prevent immediate control while requiring Jared's claims to be tested at a hearing. Jared would receive notice that his emergency authority had not yet been granted. His response, we believed, would be panic. It came within hours. My phone rang shortly after 6. Jared sounded strained. "Dad, did you hire a..." I let several seconds pass. "A lawyer, someone filed something against my petition," he said, then caught himself. I repeated the word petition as though I did not understand. He recovered quickly. "Just paperwork to help with your medical care. Maybe the court assigned someone automatically. Do not worry about it." I asked if I had done something wrong. His tone softened immediately. "No, Dad. Just confused right now. Natalie and I are going to make everything easier." I told him I was grateful. Then before hanging up, I added that I had found an old bank statement showing more money than I remembered having. I said I might go to the branch Monday to ask about it. Silence. Then he told me not to go alone. Monday morning, I stayed home. Jared and Natalie went to the bank instead. Carter had positioned himself across the street with a camera. Samantha had coordinated with the bank's counsel, so the branch manager knew a vulnerable adult exploitation concern existed, but would follow normal procedures. Jared entered carrying a folder. Natalie walked beside him wearing a cream coat and the expression she used when she expected service. They remained inside for 43 minutes. What happened in the office was later documented in the bank's incident report. Jared presented these petition, the bought doctor's letter, and another document that appeared to certify that I lacked capacity and that he was authorized to act temporarily for me. The temporary authority did not exist. The court had not granted it. The certificate used language copied from a legitimate form, but contained altered signatures. Jared asked to transfer the entire balance of my savings account to an account he controlled. About $80,000. The branch manager reviewed the papers, left the room, and contacted legal. When she returned, she told him the account had been restricted, pending verification, and that no withdrawal could occur. Jared became agitated. He insisted I was incompetent, that he was my son, and that delaying access endangered my care. Natalie demanded the manager call the supposed doctor. The manager refused to bypass the hold. She informed them that any further attempt to use disputed authority would be referred to the bank's fraud unit. Jared left without $1. Carter was still filming when they reached the parking lot. Jared slammed the folder against the roof of his car. Natalie shouted something Carter could not hear over traffic. Jared opened the driver's door, and that was when a black sport utility vehicle stopped at the curb. 2 men stepped out. We never learned their names, and Carter made no attempt to approach them. One remained by the SUV. The other walked directly to Jared's car and struck the passenger window with a compact metal tool. The glass collapsed inward in a glittering sheet. Natalie screamed. The man said something close to Jared's face, tapped the broken window frame twice, and returned to the SUV. The entire encounter lasted less than 30 seconds. Jared did not call police. That told us more than the smashed glass. Carter followed from a distance after the SUV left. Jared drove to a parking garage beneath his office, stayed there for nearly an hour, then went to a print shop. When he emerged, he carried a thick envelope. By evening, he was at my front door. I had been expecting him. The house cameras were running. Carter had added a second angle covering the dining table. In my pocket sat a pen he had given me that morning. It looked like an ordinary black rollerball. The ink remained visible for several hours before a chemical reaction caused it to fade. Carter told me it was a novelty security product, not magic, and warned me not to rely on it as the only defense. The real protection was the video, the absence of valid authority, and the trust's ownership structure. The disappearing signature was simply one more obstacle for Jared. Jared entered carrying groceries and concern. Natalie was not with him. A fresh bandage crossed 2 knuckles on his right hand. He said he had brought insurance forms that would help me qualify for home medical support. I invited him to the dining table. He spread papers across it in a carefully arranged stack. The first pages were harmless-looking health questionnaires. The next were authorizations to release medical records. Beneath them sat a durable power form he had partially completed. Under that, buried between pages labeled supplemental coverage, was a property assignment, transferring my rights in the house to Jared as agent and beneficiary. He had disguised a grab for ownership inside documents he assumed I would sign without reading. He placed a blue tab beside each signature line. Just sign where I marked Dad. I asked what the papers did. He said they allowed him to talk to insurance companies and manage appointments. I picked up the first sheet, held it too close to my face, and asked whether I needed my glasses. He told me not to bother, because he had already checked everything. That sentence went into 3 cameras and an audio recorder. I signed the first medical release with my normal pen. I signed the second. When I reached the hidden property assignment, I switched pens while pretending to fumble in my shirt pocket. Carter's disappearing ink flowed dark and smooth across the line. Stanley Mercer. Jared watched the signature form and exhaled through his nose. He moved quickly after that. He slid the page beneath the others before I could supposedly reread it. I asked whether I had just signed something about the house. Jared laughed softly. No, Dad. Just insurance. You are doing great. 2 more pages. His reassurance became another recorded lie. I signed the remaining harmless forms, then pushed the stack back toward him. He gathered it with almost reverent care. Before leaving, he asked for my spare house key, because he said emergency caregivers might need access. I told him I had misplaced it. His mouth tightened. Then I held out the key he already used. Maybe take this one, I said. I do not drive anywhere much now anyway. It was not my car key, the house key. Jared accepted it as though receiving a trophy. At the door, he hugged me. I did not return the embrace. He seemed not to notice. He whispered that everything would be easier soon. The instant his car left, Carter came through the garage. We reviewed the footage frame by frame. The hidden property assignment was legible when Jared placed it on the table. The signature line and wording were visible from the overhead camera. The audio captured his repeated claim that the documents involved insurance only. Carter exported 3 copies and wrote the hash values into his evidence log. Samantha arrived 20 minutes later. She watched the sequence once, then asked to see the property ownership file. I handed it to her. Jared could not legally obtain what he thought he had acquired because I did not personally own the house outright. My residential right could not be assigned in the manner he had drafted, and the underlying property belonged to the trust-owned company. Still, his document mattered. It showed intent deception and an attempt to obtain control of property through false representations. Samantha also checked the court docket. The temporary conservatorship remained unresolved. Jared had submitted an amended filing that morning, attaching the bought doctor's letter and the same forged capacity certificate he had used at the bank. He had now placed disputed medical material before a court and a financial institution. The lie was no longer contained inside our family. We waited 24 hours. The next afternoon, the signature on the property assignment had faded to a pale gray ghost. Carter photographed the chemical change on a duplicate test sheet, prepared from the same pen, establishing how the ink behaved. We did not possess Jared's original, but we did not need to. If he relied on it, he would either produce a document with a vanishing signature or attempt to alter it. Either choice created another problem for him. He chose alteration. 2 days later, Samantha received notice through the property recording system that a deed-related instrument had been submitted electronically by a document service. The uploaded copy contained a crisp black signature where mine should have been. It was not the signature I had written. Someone had traced or reproduced it after the original faded. The instrument falsely represented that I had authority to transfer the property and that Jared held valid control under the pending conservatorship matter. Samantha printed the submission and placed it beside a still image from our dining room camera. The difference was obvious. In the video, my signature slanted upward, and the final loop in my last name was open. On the submitted document, the line sat flatter and the loop was closed. Jared had moved from coercion to document alteration. He still believed he was racing only debt collectors and an old man's failing memory. He had no idea Samantha's firm received automatic alerts on every filing connected to the trust property. The recording office flagged the instrument because the named owner did not match the person transferring it. Samantha responded with the trust documentation and a notice of suspected fraud. The filing was suspended before it could change anything. That evening, Jared called me in a rage disguised as concern. "Dad, did some lawyer contact you about the house?" I told him I did not remember. He asked whether I had signed papers for anyone else recently. I said maybe, then asked whether he had brought me groceries yesterday or last month. He softened again. "Never mind, Dad. Just do not sign anything unless I am there." I almost admired the audacity. Natalie began calling too. Her voice had lost its polished warmth. She asked whether strangers had been visiting, whether I had spoken to anyone named Samantha, whether I remembered a man in a white utility van. Carter's precautions had worked. She had fragments, not proof. I told her the garbage truck came on Thursdays and asked if that was what she meant. She hung up frustrated. Their surveillance feeds became more active. Carter tracked repeated remote access late at night. The office camera zoomed toward my desk whenever I opened mail. The kitchen feed activated whenever I used the phone. I started giving them carefully selected false information. I complained aloud that the bank had frozen my account because I could not remember a password. I said I might sell my tools to pay bills. I left a nursing home brochure on the table with one facility circled. The effect was immediate. Jared stopped trying to pressure the bank and shifted toward controlling my living arrangements. If he could move me out of the house, he could occupy it, present possession as normal, and continue fighting over the paperwork, while his lenders saw an asset they believed was becoming available. Natalie called the circled facility and requested information in my name. Carter obtained the call log lawfully through the facility after Samantha sent a preservation request related to suspected elder exploitation. Thanksgiving was 4 days away when Jared invited me to dinner at the most expensive restaurant in the city. The invitation itself told me what he planned. Jared had not taken me to a restaurant like that in years. He said Natalie wanted to make the holiday special because we had all been under stress. He added that they had important good news about my care. I acted touched. I told him I would wear my good jacket if I could remember where I had put it. After the call, Samantha laid the final pieces of our response on the conference table. Bank incident report. Laboratory result. Independent cognitive examinations. Videos of medication tampering and key manipulation. Recording of the spot doctor. Footage of the false signature session. Copy of the altered property filing. Court docket. Evidence of Natalie's break-in and the $1.5 million debt motive. Carter looked at the stack and said, Jared had no idea what was waiting for him. Samantha corrected him. He knows one thing. He knows his deadline is closing. Desperate people do not stop when a plan fails. They compress the plan. I asked what she expected at dinner. She tapped the conservatorship petition. He will try to turn temporary concern into practical control before the court rejects him. He may demand your keys announce a facility placement or claim authority he does not have. Let him speak. Let him put every lie on the table himself. Then she slid a separate folder toward me. Inside was an order and supporting legal notice addressing the fraudulent filings and disputed medical documents. She had coordinated with law enforcement investigators who had reviewed enough evidence to act if Jared or Natalie committed another overt step or attempted to enforce the forged instruments. 2 officers would be nearby, not visible unless needed. I closed the folder. For weeks, Jared and Natalie had controlled the rooms by deciding what I could supposedly remember, what medicine I swallowed, where my keys appeared, and what story strangers would hear about me. Thanksgiving would be different. They had chosen the table. They had chosen the audience. But for the first time, they would not control what was served. Thanksgiving evening arrived cold and clear. I dressed slowly, choosing the same dark suit I had worn to my wife's funeral. Not because I wanted the night to feel like a burial, but because it was the last suit she had chosen for me. She used to say, "Stand straighter." Before leaving, I stood beneath the bedroom smoke detector and let the hidden camera see me struggle with my tie. I dropped it once, muttered that my hands no longer worked properly, then sat on the bed as if exhausted. Somewhere, perhaps in Jared's condo or on Natalie's phone, they were watching an old man prepare to surrender. Carter drove me downtown, but stopped 2 blocks from the restaurant. I walked the rest of the way with a cane I did not need. The restaurant occupied the top floor of a hotel, all glass walls, polished stone, and quiet staff trained not to stare at wealthy people. Jared had reserved a private dining alcove screened by dark wood panels. Natalie was already seated when I arrived. She wore a deep red dress and a diamond necklace I had never seen before. Jared wore a navy suit, but no amount of tailoring could hide the strain around his mouth. He stood and took my arm before I could reach the chair. "Easy, Dad. I can help you." I let some of my weight fall toward him. Natalie kissed my cheek and said I looked tired. I told her I had forgotten lunch. She exchanged a glance with Jared. That glance was not worry. It was confirmation. A waiter poured water. Jared ordered for me without asking, choosing soup and soft fish as though I had become incapable of reading a menu. I did not object. He needed to feel in command. For the first 20 minutes, they talked about harmless things, holiday traffic, weather, a television show I had never watched. Natalie asked the same question twice about whether I had been sleeping well, apparently hoping I would answer differently. I gave her 2 slightly different answers. When the appetizers were cleared, Jared placed a leather folder on the table. There it was. He rested both hands on it before opening. "Dad," he said, "Natalie and I have been doing a lot of thinking. We know the last few weeks have been confusing for you." I lowered my eyes. He continued. "We talked to doctors, attorneys, and people who specialize in senior care. Everybody agrees you need more. Everybody. A bought doctor, a forged certificate, and the two people trying to seize my home had become everybody." Natalie leaned forward with practiced tenderness. "Stanley, no one is trying to take anything away from you. We are trying to give you safety. The house is too much. The stairs are dangerous. You forget medication. You lose your keys. You leave important papers out. What if you fall at night and nobody finds you?" I asked where they thought I should go. She produced a glossy brochure from her purse, the same facility she had called days earlier. Private rooms, supervised medication, meals, activities. She spoke about it like a resort. Then she said the room could be ready by Monday. Monday. It was Thursday night. I asked what would happen to my house. Jared opened the leather folder. "That is part of what we need to discuss." He removed a document with a court heading and placed it in front of me. The petition for conservatorship. Beside it, he placed the bought doctor's statement. Then he added a photocopy of the altered property assignment. The forged version of my signature looked almost comic now that I knew where to look. "Dad," Jared said, "I have already taken steps, so you do not have to worry about any of this. Once the court finalizes the arrangement, I will handle the house, banking, insurance, everything. You will just focus on getting better." I asked whether the court had already made him my conservator. His answer came too quickly. Essentially, yes. Samantha had warned me he might lie about the status. I looked confused. "Essentially," Jared adjusted his fork. "The paperwork is in process. The doctor has certified your condition. The legal authority is there. We are just waiting for formalities." That statement went into the recorder clipped beneath my jacket lapel. Carter sat in the hotel lobby monitoring the feed from a device in my pocket. Natalie held out her hand. "We need your house keys, Stanley. It will be easier if Jared starts securing things before the move. We do not want you wandering back there alone after Monday." I kept my hand in my pocket and touched the key ring. For weeks they had moved my keys, hidden them, returned them, and used them to prove I could not manage my own life. Now they were asking me to surrender them openly. I asked whether I could think about it. Jared's sympathy hardened around the edges. "Dad, this is not really something you can decide safely anymore." That was the moment. I stopped shaking my hand. The tremor vanished so completely that Natalie noticed first. Her eyes moved from my fingers to my face. I placed the cane flat on the floor beside my chair. Then I straightened my back. Jared stared. I reached for my water glass and lifted it without a single tremble. "You know," I said, my voice no longer thin or uncertain, "I have been thinking about that exact sentence for 3 weeks." Neither of them moved. I continued. "You keep telling me what I can decide, what I remember, what I signed, what medicine I took, what I did with my keys. You have worked very hard to build a version of me that needs your permission to exist." Natalie's face lost color. Jared tried to laugh. "Dad, I do not know what this is, but you are upset. We should not agitate you." I reached beneath my chair and lifted the slim document case Carter had placed there before the reservation. I set it on the table and opened the clasp. "No, Jared. I am not agitated. I am finished." I removed the first sheet and slid it toward him. It was a still image from Carter's camera showing Natalie entering my kitchen with a key in one hand and gloves on both hands. The timestamp sat across the bottom. Natalie looked at the image and stopped breathing for a second. I placed a second photograph on top of it, her hand on the safe keypad. A third showed her pulling files from my desk. A fourth showed her on the phone. I quoted her exact words. "The old man does not keep the deed here. The black market lenders are going to come for you, Jared. Jared's fork hit the plate. He looked at Natalie. She looked back at him with open panic. How did you get that? She whispered. I ignored the question and removed the next sheet. $1.5 million, I said. That is approximately what you owe after the crypto losses, private loans, the second mortgage, and the settlements connected to your consulting business. I listed the shell companies Carter had traced the liens and the judgment history. Jared's expression shifted from disbelief to calculation. He was trying to determine which leak had exposed him. You hired someone, he said. Of course I hired someone. You put cameras in my bedroom. The words came out quietly. That made them land harder. A couple at a nearby table beyond the divider glanced over. Jared lowered his voice. Dad. Whatever you think you found, you are confused about the context. I removed a laboratory report. Then let us discuss context. These are the pills Natalie put into my medicine organizer. Natalie's chair scraped backward. I showed them the report identifying the sedating drug. Then I placed a photograph on the table showing her hand inside the medicine cabinet. A second image showed Jared removing my keys from the hook. A third showed Natalie placing them in the trash. You told people I forgot where I put things. You made me forget by moving them. You told people I was drowsy. You tried to make me drowsy by replacing my medication. You told a court I could not manage medicine. Your evidence of incompetence was evidence you manufactured yourselves. Jared turned toward Natalie. What did you do with the pills? She snapped back. Do not act like you did not know. The first fracture opened right there between them. I took out a small audio player. Jared reached across the table. What is that? I pressed play. The bought doctor's voice filled the alcove. The screening alone was weak. Then Jared's voice asked how much more the doctor wanted for a letter, saying I could not manage finances, or the amount followed. 5,000, now 5,000 after the temporary order. Natalie could be heard complaining about the earlier payment. Jared told the doctor to write that I was a danger to myself. I stopped the recording. Nobody at our table spoke. Jared's face had gone waxy. Natalie looked toward the restaurant exit. I said, You did not find a doctor. You bought a sentence. Jared recovered enough to point at me. Recording private conversations can be illegal. I almost smiled. You negotiated in my hallway during a visit in my house. You can explain your theory to the investigators. Investigators, that single word changed the room. I pulled out the bank incident report. I told him the bank had preserved his attempt to withdraw my $80,000 using documents the court had never authorized. I placed a copy of the forged capacity certificate beside the report. Then I placed the electronic property filing beside that. You tried the bank. They froze the account. Then your lenders broke your car window. Then you came to my house and hid a property transfer inside insurance forms. Jared opened his mouth, but I raised one finger. I am not finished. I put a still image from the dining table camera in front of him. The hidden transfer page was visible. His own hand pointed at a blue signature tab. Your exact words were just sign where I marked Dad. When I asked whether I had signed something about the house, you told me no, just insurance. Natalie stared at Jared. You said the paper was clean. He snapped. Shut up. She stood halfway from her chair. Do not tell me to shut up. You said he would never know. Jared grabbed her wrist under the table. She jerked away. The performance of a united, concerned couple collapsed in less than 30 seconds. Jared turned back to me. Even if you recorded everything you signed, you cannot pretend you did not sign just because you regret it. He froze. The silence answered before he did. The ink disappeared, did it not? I said. Natalie's eyes widened. Jared stared at me with pure hatred now. I explained that the pen he had watched me use on the property page contained ink designed to fade. Carter had documented the process. Whatever signature appeared on the electronic filing afterward had been added by someone else. "That is fraud," Natalie whispered. Jared turned on her. "We are not doing this here." I said, "You already did it. Here is only where you finally get to hear the list." I reached the last set of documents. Jared leaned back and tried to regain control through volume. "You are insane. Do you hear yourself? Secret cameras, disappearing ink, private investigators. This proves everything we have said. You are paranoid. I have medical certification. I filed for conservatorship. You do not have the authority to interfere with what I am doing for your care." He slapped the court papers with his palm. I looked directly at him. "You do not have an order." He hesitated. I repeated it. "You filed a petition. You were denied emergency control. You have no conservatorship. You have no power over my bank. You have no power over my medical decisions. And you never had power over the house." That last sentence confused him. He grabbed the altered property filing. "I have the assignment." "No. You have a forged document attempting to transfer an interest I could not transfer to you in the first place." I saw him trying to process the legal wording. Then Samantha stepped through the divider. She had been seated 2 hours beyond the private dining area. She carried a black portfolio and wore the expression I had seen when companies tried to bluff her with contracts she had drafted herself. "Good evening, Jared," she said. He looked from her to me. "Who are you?" Samantha placed her business card on the table. "I represent Stanley and administer the trust structure that owns the underlying property you attempted to transfer." Natalie sank back into her chair. Jared stared at the card. "Trust." Samantha opened her portfolio. "The residence you refer to as your father's house is held by a company owned within a blind trust. Stanley has protected occupancy rights, but the title is not his personal asset for you to seize through a fabricated medical authorization. The instrument you submitted falsely represented ownership and authority involving a corporate asset." Jared looked at me as if I had changed species. "What blind trust?" I answered him myself. "The one you never knew existed because you were too busy counting what you thought you could steal." Samantha placed a certified ownership summary on the table, followed by the court notice suspending the disputed filings and directing that the forged instruments carry no authority. By using false medical authority and an altered electronic filing to reach a trust-owned corporate asset. She told Jared he had created potential federal fraud exposure as well as state charges. Jared scanned the numbers and names without understanding the scale yet. Then his eyes reached the licensing entity tied to my patent. He looked up slowly. "Patent?" I let him ask. "What patent?" "The piston core," I said. "The one I designed 20 years ago." He gave a disbelieving laugh. "You were a mechanic." "I was. I still am when something deserves fixing," Samantha continued, before the exchange could become sentimental. "The patent generated licensing revenue. That revenue funded the trust. The trust holds multiple assets. Your father's ordinary bank account was not the estate you imagined. It was a fraction of his accessible cash." Natalie whispered how much Samantha did not answer with a total. She did not need to. She slid forward one royalty statement showing 7 figures of annual licensing income. Natalie's mouth opened. Jared read the page twice. "All this time," he said. His voice sounded younger, almost like the boy who used to ask why I would not buy a new truck when the old one still ran. "All this time you had money," I said. "All this time I had a life you never bothered to ask about, unless you thought it could pay your debts." He slammed the statement down. "You let me struggle." There it was. Not remorse. Accusation. I reminded him that he was 42 years old, trained in finance, earning enough to live comfortably before gambling through leverage. I did not force him into crypto. I did not sign his private loans. I did not tell him to borrow from men who broke car windows. My hidden wealth, but you could have fixed it, he said. No. I could have paid it. That is not the same thing. Natalie stared at the royalty statement as if hypnotized. If we had known, she said, none of this would have happened. I looked at her. That is exactly why you were never told. The two officers entered the alcove. Jared stood so quickly, his chair tipped backward. One officer told him to remain where he was. The other positioned himself near Natalie. Samantha identified the documents law enforcement had already reviewed: suspected forged medical certification, attempted bank fraud, fraudulent property filing, elder exploitation, medication, tampering, and evidence of unlawful surveillance and unauthorized entry. Jared pointed at me. This is a family dispute. The officer answered that medication tampering and forged financial documents were not family disputes. Natalie began speaking rapidly. She said the cameras were Jared's idea. She said she had only entered the house because Jared gave her a key. She said she thought the pills were harmless. Jared turned on her. You bought them. You told me what to get. You put them in his organizer. Because you said we needed him sleepy for the evaluation. Every sentence made the officer's job easier. Samantha quietly told them both to stop talking unless they intended to waive counsel. They ignored her because panic had replaced strategy. Jared's voice rose. He is setting us up. He pretended to be sick. He deliberately failed the test. He used disappearing ink. That proves entrapment. Samantha said, no one forced you to install cameras, alter medication, pay a doctor, submit false documents, enter a home without permission, or forge a signature after the original disappeared. Jared looked around the table as though searching for one fact. Then he saw my key ring beside my plate. He reached for it. The nearest officer caught his wrist before his fingers touched the metal. That small movement ended whatever discretion remained. Jared was told to place his hands behind his back. Natalie began crying before the handcuffs came out. She asked whether they were truly being arrested on Thanksgiving. The officer replied that the date did not change the evidence. Jared resisted verbally, demanding to see warrants, demanding a supervisor, demanding that Samantha prove the trust. The officer did not argue about the case at the table. He repeated instructions. Jared finally complied. As the cuffs closed around my son's wrists, I expected triumph. I felt none. I felt tired. The restaurant staff had frozen at a distance. A few diners watched openly now. The expensive room Jared had chosen to demonstrate control had become the place where his control ended. Natalie was escorted out first. She would not look at me. Jared did. At the edge of the alcove, he twisted his shoulders and said, "Dad, do something." It was the same command he had used when he was 17. And his first car died on the highway. Dad, do something. Back then I had driven out in the rain with a toolbox and fixed the fuel line under a flashlight. This time I stayed seated. The officers took him away. Samantha waited until the dining area settled before sitting across from me. Carter entered from the lobby and retrieved the recorder. He checked the file, then nodded once. We had the entire exchange. I looked at the untouched Thanksgiving meal in front of me. The soup had gone cold. The fish had not arrived. Samantha asked whether I wanted to leave. Not yet, I said. I called the waiter back and ordered a steak. Carter almost laughed. Samantha raised one eyebrow. For 3 weeks, people had decided what I should eat, where I should live, what I should remember, and whether I could manage my own life. I wanted one ordinary decision that belonged only to me. When the steak came, I cut it myself. By the time I finished dinner, Jared and Natalie were already at the police station. I went there with Samantha because investigators needed a formal statement and copies of the evidence chain. Carter came separately, did drives. The station smelled of old coffee, wet coats, and floor cleaner. Nothing about it felt cinematic. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Phones rang. A printer jammed somewhere behind the front desk. The ordinariness made the consequences feel more real. An investigator led us into a small interview room. Samantha did most of the organizing. She placed the evidence in chronological order, not dramatic order. First, the hidden cameras, then the unauthorized entry, then the safe, then medication replacement, then the keys, then the fraudulent cognitive evaluation, then the court filing bank attempt deceptive signature session and altered property instrument. Every item answered the question created by the one before it. Carter explained how he had preserved the original recordings' timestamps, device identifiers, and file hashes. The investigator asked whether any footage had been edited. Carter said copies had been made for viewing, but the originals remained untouched. He produced the storage devices. The investigator signed them into evidence. When we reached the medication video, the investigator's tone changed. Financial fraud was serious. Secretly replacing an older person's prescribed medicine introduced physical danger. The laboratory report documented what the substitute contained. My independent medical records documented that the symptoms Jared described did not exist when I was tested under controlled conditions. The bought doctor's recording documented a willingness to exaggerate them for money. The investigator asked why I had waited instead of immediately reporting the first camera. I answered honestly. At first, I did not know who installed it or why. Once Jared revealed knowledge he could only have gained through surveillance. I needed to understand the full plan. After we discovered medication tampering, Carter and Samantha controlled my exposure and preserved evidence. I told him I understood the risk. I also told him that without the recordings, my son would have described everything as a concerned family, trying to help a confused father. Samantha added that elder exploitation often hid behind language of care. Concern became a permission slip. Privacy violations became supervision. Financial control became protection. In my case, the defendants had repeatedly manufactured the very symptoms they later cited as justification for control. The investigator reviewed the conservatorship filing. Because the emergency request had never been granted, Jared had possessed no authority to represent himself as my conservator at the bank or in the property transfer. The forged certificate and altered signature made the paper trail especially damaging. Samantha had already preserved the electronic submission records, including the account used to upload the property document. Then Carter produced one more item. The surveillance receiver he had traced from Jared's cameras had connected repeatedly to a specific device registered through Jared's consulting business. The network relay obscured location, but the device identifier linked the viewing sessions to equipment purchased on a company card. Jared had used his own business to buy the tools for spying on me. I looked at Samantha. We had not discussed that detail at dinner because we had not needed it. She gave Carter the smallest nod. Another piece locked into place. The station clock moved past midnight before my statement was finished. As we prepared to leave, an officer told us Natalie had requested to speak with investigators again. She was already trying to separate her actions from Jared's. According to the officer, she claimed Jared had planned the conservatorship, selected the fake doctor, and instructed her to switch the medication. She admitted entering my house with a copied key, but insisted she believed Jared had a right to let her in. Jared, meanwhile, was blaming Natalie for the break-in and the altered signature. He said she had handled the paperwork because she was better with administrative tasks. The partnership that had looked so coordinated across my dining table was disintegrating under fluorescent lights. I asked whether I could see my son. Samantha studied me before answering. You do not owe him a conversation tonight. I know. You also do not need to make legal promises, financial promises, or statements that can be used to pressure you later. I know that too. She asked why I wanted to see him. Because there is one thing I need him to hear from me when there is no camera. He planted no doctor. He bought, and no wife whispering the next move. The officer arranged a short supervised meeting in an interview room separated from the main booking area. Jared entered without his suit jacket or tie. His shirt collar was open. The confidence I had seen at Sunday dinner's bank meetings and the restaurant had vanished. He looked smaller than he had that morning, not physically, but in the way a man looks when every borrowed layer of status has been removed. For several seconds, he stared at me without speaking. Then he said, "Dad, you have to fix this. Not hello. Not I am sorry. Not are you all right. You have to fix this." I sat across from him and folded my hands on the metal table. He leaned forward. "Natalie is telling them everything was my idea. She is lying. You know how she is. She pushed me. She kept saying we needed the house, that we were running out of time. She handled the medication. She went into your office. I never wanted it to go this far." I asked who installed the bedroom camera. His mouth closed. "Who installed it, Jared?" He looked toward the wall. "I did." "Who installed the living room camera?" "I did." "The kitchen?" "Me." "The office?" He swallowed. "Me." I asked who first suggested making me look forgetful. He rubbed both hands over his face. "It was not like that at first. I just needed proof you were not managing things well. You had money sitting in the bank. You had the house. You were getting older. I thought if I could take over temporarily, I could fix my situation and put everything back before you even knew. Put everything back." The phrase revealed how he had justified theft to himself. Borrowing from an old man who could not object. Taking control only until the debt was gone. Returning what remained and calling it care. I asked whether the $1.5 million would have disappeared after he sold my house and emptied my accounts. He looked at me desperately. "I did not know about the trust. If I had known, I would have come to you." "For what help? Would you have told me the truth?" He did not answer. I asked again. "Would you have said, 'Dad, I gambled through investments, hid losses, borrowed from dangerous lenders, and I need help before I destroy my life?'" His eyes filled with tears. "Maybe." "No," I said. "You would have found a larger number to steal." He flinched. Then he did something I had not seen him do since he was a child. He slid out of the chair and dropped to his knees beside the table. "Dad, please." The officer near the door shifted but did not intervene. Jared gripped the edge of the table. "I am going to prison. Those people I owe money to do not care that I am arrested. They will come after everything. They might come after Natalie. They might come after me when I get out. You can stop this. You have enough. Samantha said the royalties are millions. Pay them. Hire the best lawyers. Tell the police you misunderstood. Tell them the pills were an accident. Please." I watched my son beg for money to erase the consequences of trying to steal my money. "I am your blood. You cannot let strangers destroy me. Blood has to mean something." That was when the last piece of grief inside me hardened into certainty. "Blood does not hide a camera in his father's bedroom and wait for him to die," I said. "Blood does not drug him, move his keys, buy a doctor, and tell a court he cannot think for himself. Blood does not counterfeit concern, so it can inherit early." Jared's face crumpled. I leaned forward just enough that he had to look at me. "You are not my son. You are just a failed investment." The words were cruel. I knew that as I said them. But cruelty had not created the moment. Choices had. For decades, I had invested time, patience, sacrifice, tuition, second chances, advice, and love into raising him. I had expected no financial return. The only return I ever wanted was character. When the test came, he spent it all. He whispered, "You do not mean that." "I do." He reached toward my sleeve. The officer stepped closer. Jared pulled his hand back. "I told him I would not pay the lenders. I would not buy a false recantation. I would not pressure investigators, and I would not use the trust to make the criminal case disappear. He would have counsel because the law gave him that right." He would have due process because every person deserved it. But he would not have my money as a weapon against accountability. He asked whether I would at least pay his bail. No. His expression changed again. Grief became anger. So this is revenge. No, Jared. Revenge would be me doing to you what you tried to do to me. I am not drugging you. I am not forging your signature. I am not lying to a judge. I am letting the truth stay where you put it. He stared at me for a long time. Then he stood. As the officer led him away, he turned once. Dad. He had one last chance to say something human. Instead, he said, "At least do not let them take the condo." The door closed behind him. Samantha was waiting in the hallway. She did not ask what he had said. My face must have told her enough. We walked out of the station shortly after 1 in the morning. Carter drove me home. The streets were almost empty. Holiday decorations glowed in shop windows. Families who had eaten dinner hours earlier were sleeping. My house appeared at the end of the block, exactly as it always had, porch light on maple tree, bare garage door needing paint. Yet when I stepped inside, it felt contaminated by knowledge. 4 of Jared's cameras were still in place because police had asked us not to disturb them until evidence technicians could document and remove them. For one final night, I slept in the guest room outside the bedroom lens. Carter stayed on the sofa. Neither of us spoke much. The next morning, evidence technicians photographed the device's wiring entry points and medication cabinet. They removed each hidden camera into a separate bag. The smoke detector camera came last. I watched from the bedroom doorway while a technician unscrewed the cover and exposed the same tiny black lens I had found weeks earlier. The technician asked whether I wanted the detector replaced. I said I would do it myself after they were finished. By noon, the house belonged to silence again. But consequences were only beginning outside it. The court dismissed Jared's emergency conservatorship request after Samantha filed the independent medical evaluations and notified the judge of the criminal investigation. The bought doctor's letter was referred for review. His professional status, whatever remained of it, became part of a separate inquiry. I did not follow every development. Samantha told me enough to know that a white coat had not protected him from a recording of his own price. The bank's fraud unit completed its report and preserved the attempted withdrawal documents. The recording office maintained the hold on the fraudulent property filing and provided the electronic submission data to investigators. Jared's consulting business accounts were scrutinized because equipment used for the surveillance had been purchased through the firm. The farther investigators looked, the less the case resembled a family misunderstanding. Natalie's unauthorized entry was easy to establish. Carter's camera showed her unlocking the door with a copied key, wearing gloves, accessing my safe, searching private files, and discussing Jared's debt. Her later claim that she had entered only to check on my welfare did not survive the footage of her emptying drawers while I was supposedly on a walk. The medication evidence was worse. Video showed her removing my prescribed pills and replacing them. The laboratory identified the substitute. My physician documented that I had not consented to any change. Jared's phone records linked his calls to the mornings when he expected me to take the substituted tablets. His questions about whether I felt sleepy suddenly had a different meaning when placed beside the timeline. Their lawyers eventually stopped using the word dementia. That alone felt like a restoration. For weeks, every conversation around me had turned my age into evidence. At 71, forgetfulness became presumed illness. Caution became paranoia. Refusal became irrationality. Once the records were examined independently, the pattern reversed. My memory had not failed. Their story had. The men connected to Jared's private debts did not appear at my house. Samantha made sure my residence and trust information were protected, and law enforcement had been informed about the threats implied by the broken car window. I did not pay Jared's lenders. His debts remained his. Whatever civil claims followed would have to move through lawful channels rather than through my bedroom ceiling. A week after Thanksgiving, Samantha came to the house with a stack of estate documents. She asked whether I still wanted Jared listed as a future beneficiary in any capacity. Before the betrayal, my estate plan had contained a conditional provision that could eventually benefit him if the trust administrators determined he was financially responsible. He had never known it existed. I removed him. The decision did not feel satisfying. It felt necessary. I also removed any provision that could allow Natalie to benefit indirectly through him. Samantha asked whether I wanted to redirect those interests to other relatives. I said no. The problem had not begun because I lacked heirs. It had begun because people believed blood created a claim on another person's life. For years, I had received letters from trade schools and community programs asking for scholarship support. I had donated modestly and anonymously, never wanting my name on a building. Now I thought about young people who could build something with opportunity instead of using opportunity to take. I told Samantha I wanted a large portion of my future estate and a defined share of annual royalty income committed to scholarships for orphaned and foster youth pursuing engineering, machining, aviation maintenance, and skilled trades. She asked whether I wanted the fund named after me. No, after my wife. That was the first decision in weeks that made me smile without acting. She had believed in the piston core before anyone else did. When I brought the first rough prototype home in a lunchbox, she turned it over in her hands and asked why I was giving the design away to employers who had not solved the problem themselves. She was the one who made me speak to a patent attorney. The wealth Jared tried to steal existed because she had recognized value where I saw only a part that worked better. The scholarship would carry her name. Carter came by later that afternoon to remove his cameras. Unlike Jared's, his devices had always pointed at evidence, not at my private life. Still, when the last one came down, the house felt lighter. He patched the tiny mounting holes and handed me a small drive containing my personal copy of the recordings. "Keep it somewhere secure," he said. I asked whether I would ever need to watch them again. Probably not. Good. I locked the drive in a bank safe deposit box, alongside certified copies of the case documents. The real leather notebook returned to my desk drawer. For the first time since the night Jared mentioned it, I could open it without imagining a lens watching my hands. The next months moved more quietly than the weeks before Thanksgiving. Jared and Natalie faced charges connected to fraud, forged documents, elder exploitation, and the conduct captured on video. Their cases developed separately as each tried to reduce personal responsibility. I attended only the proceedings Samantha said required me. I refused interview requests and ignored messages from people who suddenly wanted to know how a retired mechanic had accumulated wealth. My wealth had never been the interesting part to me. The dangerous part was how quickly knowledge of it changed the way other people looked at my choices. Jared sent 2 letters through his attorney. The first blamed panic. The second blamed debt. Neither contained the words "I drugged you." Neither said "I invaded your bedroom." Neither said "I lied about your mind." Both asked whether I would consider financial help if he accepted a plea agreement. I did not reply. Natalie sent no apology. Through her lawyer, she argued that she had acted under Jared's pressure. The recordings told a more complicated story. She had not been a passenger. She had been the person in gloves at my safe, the person switching pills, the person calling the care facility. Whether fear of debt had motivated her did not erase what she chose to do. The criminal case moved through the system without the dramatic speed people expect from television. Evidence had to be authenticated. Lawyers challenged warrants. Experts reviewed the altered medical documents. The court set dates, moved dates, and required each side to disclose what it intended to rely on. I learned that consequences are often less like an explosion and more like a heavy door closing 1 inch at a time. Samantha shielded me from most of the procedural noise but she insisted I understand the important parts. The prosecution did not build the case around the amount of my wealth. In fact, the trust was largely irrelevant to whether Jared and Natalie had committed crimes. That mattered to me. I did not want the story reduced to a rich father punishing greedy children. If I had owned only the house and $80,000, their actions would have been just as wrong. The strongest evidence came from their own sequence of decisions. Jared installed the cameras before any legitimate medical concern existed. Natalie entered the house before any court authority existed. The medication was replaced before the bought doctor evaluated me. The keys were moved before Jared cited them as evidence of confusion. The doctor's payment discussion occurred before his letter described severe impairment. The forged certificate appeared before any judge granted authority. Each step exposed the next as manufactured. Their defense tried to isolate the events. A camera was concern. A missing key was misunderstanding. A pill substitution was a mistake. A questionable doctor was poor judgment. A bank visit was family urgency. But when the events were placed in order, coincidence disappeared. The pattern was the evidence. The bought doctor became a problem for them almost immediately. Faced with the recording of his fee negotiation, he stopped pretending the home evaluation had been independent. Through counsel, he admitted accepting money from Jared beyond any normal consultation fee. He tried to claim the payment was for expedited paperwork. The audio contradicted him. He had named one price for the letter and another payment after temporary control was obtained. His report had described me as unable to understand basic financial decisions. Samantha placed that sentence beside my independent cognitive tests and the recordings of me discussing trust structures, evidence preservation, and banking restrictions during the same week. The contrast was almost absurd. A man supposedly unable to understand a utility bill had been coordinating a legal response to fraudulent conservatorship paperwork. The court formally rejected Jared's remaining conservatorship claims and struck the disputed medical material from consideration. The order stated that no credible evidence showed I lacked capacity. It also noted that the petitioner's conduct was under criminal investigation. I kept a certified copy not because I needed a judge to tell me I was sane, but because Jared had tried to make my mind public property. The order returned it to me in black ink. The bank matter developed separately. Surveillance from the branch showed Jared presenting documents and arguing for immediate access to my account. The bank's internal notes recorded that he repeatedly claimed temporary authority already existed. Electronic copies of the papers matched the versions submitted elsewhere. His attempt to move $80,000 failed, but failure did not erase intent. The property filing created its own trail. The document service recorded the upload time, user account, network, information, and source file. Investigators recovered an earlier version from a device associated with Jared. That version contained the faded remains of my original signature. A later version contained the darker replacement. Someone had not merely misunderstood a form. Someone had repaired a disappearing signature because the transfer needed to look valid. Carter called that the most mechanical piece of evidence in the entire case. First version. Failure. Modification. Second version. You could see the decision happen between files. Natalie eventually admitted she knew the signature had faded. She claimed Jared told her I had used a defective pen and that recreating the signature merely corrected a technical problem. The explanation did not help her. She had been present when I asked what I was signing. She had heard Jared tell me it was only insurance. Correcting a signature on a document obtained through deception did not make the document honest. The broken car window also gained context. Police identified the incident as intimidation connected to Jared's private debt. The men themselves remained outside my case, but the threat explained the deadline heard in Natalie's phone call. Jared had not been stealing because he wanted a nicer vacation. He had been trying to outrun people who expected repayment and did not accept excuses. Desperation explained his motive. It did not excuse his choices. For a time, Jared's attorney explored whether I would support a treatment-oriented resolution because Jared claimed compulsive trading and extreme financial stress had impaired his judgment. Samantha asked what I wanted prosecutors to know. I said I did not oppose legitimate treatment. I opposed any version of the story that converted deliberate acts into accidents. He had purchased cameras, installed them in 4 rooms, copied keys, coordinated pills, hired a doctor, filed papers, visited a bank, and altered a property document. Stress could explain why he wanted money. It could not explain away the steps he chose to take. Natalie's lawyer made a similar argument about coercion inside the marriage. I understood that fear can make people obey terrible instructions. The video, however, showed more than obedience. At my safe, nobody stood behind her. She searched with purpose. On the phone, she pressured Jared about his debt. At the medicine cabinet, she moved the pills carefully and checked the labels. At the care facility, she initiated the placement request herself. She had agency, and she used it. Months after Thanksgiving, both of them entered pleas to serious charges rather than force every count through trial. I did not negotiate the numbers. I did not ask for maximum punishment or minimum punishment. I submitted a victim impact statement, limited to what they had taken, that could not be measured in money, privacy, safety inside my own home, confidence in medication, and trust in my son. I wrote that the greatest harm was not the attempted theft. Money could be protected, accounts frozen, documents corrected. The deeper harm was being turned into an object inside my own life. They had tried to convert my age into legal evidence against me and my love for my son into access. At the sentencing hearing, I sat beside Samantha and did not look at Jared until the judge asked whether I wished to speak. I stood without a cane. I did not mention the trust balance. I did not describe the restaurant or repeat the insults. I said only that no elderly person should have to prove sanity because relatives want property, and no family member should be permitted to manufacture illness and then call control an act of love. When I sat down, Jared was crying. I could not tell whether the tears came from remorse, fear, or the reality of confinement. By then, the distinction was no longer mine to solve. The sentences included prison time, probationary conditions, financial restrictions and orders connected to restitution, and the fraudulent documents. Natalie received her own sentence based on her conduct and cooperation. The bought doctor faced professional and legal consequences through a separate process. The exact number of months mattered less to me than the fact that none of them could rewrite the record as a misunderstanding. Jared's consulting business collapsed. Clients left. Licenses connected to his financial work came under review. The condo, already burdened by debt, became part of civil collection proceedings. I did not buy it. I did not rescue it through the trust. When Samantha asked whether I wanted to acquire the property cheaply to protect any family belongings, I said no. A boundary becomes meaningless if you keep finding sophisticated ways to cross it yourself. Some of Jared's possessions eventually came to my house because his lawyer asked whether I wanted old family photographs before storage was cleared. I accepted one small box. Inside were school pictures, baseball photos, a cracked wooden model airplane we had built together, and a Father's Day card from when he was 9. In crooked pencil, he had written that he wanted to grow up and fix things like me. I sat on the garage floor, holding that card longer than I expected. The boy who wrote it had been real. That was the hardest truth. It would have been easier to tell myself Jared had always been a monster, that every birthday, scraped knee fishing trip, and late-night conversation had been fake. They were not fake. People can once be good and later make choices that transform them. Love does not require lying about either version. I put the card back in the box. I kept the photographs. I threw away the financial brochures and luxury catalogs mixed among them. The model airplane went on a high garage shelf, not as a shrine to Jared, but as a reminder that building something takes patience and destroying it can take seconds. For several weeks after the case ended, I still checked the medicine label twice each morning. I still noticed every unexpected car slowing near the house. If a smoke detector chirped in another room, my body reacted before my mind did. Freedom had returned legally before it returned physically. The nervous system does not read court orders. Carter suggested, "Place the locks even though police had recovered the copied keys." I did. Not because I expected Jared to appear, but because the old locks belonged to the period when he had access I never intended to give. The new keys were cut on a different system. I kept one. Samantha held an emergency copy in a sealed envelope through her office. Nobody else received one. I also changed small routines that had nothing to do with security. I moved the kitchen table closer to this window. I repainted the office. I replaced the pencil cup that had hidden one of Jared's cameras. I donated the decorative clock from the living room because every time I looked at it, I saw a lens instead of hands. These were not expensive changes. That was why they mattered. I was not using millions to reinvent my life. I was making the house feel like mine again, one ordinary object at a time. The bedroom took longest. For months, I slept with the door open. Then one night, I closed it. No one commented. No one called the next morning asking what I had been doing. The privacy felt almost unfamiliar. I sat on the edge bed with my notebook, the same position Jared's original camera had captured, and realized there was no audience. That was when I understood the final theft they had attempted. Not the house, not the bank account, not even the trust they never reached. They had tried to steal the invisible assumption that a closed door means you are alone. Getting that assumption back was worth more than any judgment. One afternoon, while replacing a worn hinge on the garage cabinet, I realized I had gone several hours without thinking about either of them. That surprised me more than the trust balance ever had. Freedom did not arrive as a dramatic feeling. It arrived as uninterrupted time. I began repairing small engines for neighbors, again, not for money, but because I enjoyed the logic. A snowblower carburetor did not flatter you before failing. A lawnmower did not call you confused when you found the clogged fuel line. Machines could be complicated, but they did not rewrite reality to protect themselves. On the first day of spring, the scholarship fund approved its first grants. Samantha brought me the anonymized profiles because I did not want applicants knowing who funded them. One student had grown up in foster care and wanted to become an aircraft mechanic. Another had lost both parents before finishing high school and had spent 2 years working nights while studying machining. A third wanted to design safer industrial equipment after surviving a workplace accident as a teenager. I read every profile twice. The annual cost of those scholarships was less than the royalty payment from a single licensing quarter. Yet the money felt more valuable there than any number sitting silently in a trust account. Wealth was not impressive because it could rescue a son from consequences. It mattered because it could create a chance for someone who had not been given one. Samantha asked if I regretted keeping the trust secret from Jared. I considered the question carefully. No. If knowing about money was the only thing that could have made him treat me with respect, then the respect would never have been real. What I regretted was different. I regretted every time I explained away his entitlement because I loved him. Every time I mistook avoiding conflict for preserving family. Every time I assumed a man trained to advise other people about money would eventually learn discipline without facing consequences. But regret is useful only if it changes the next decision. The scholarship work forced me to think about money differently. For decades, I had treated the trust like a machine designed to run quietly in another room. Samantha monitored it. Royalty checks arrived. Investments changed. I signed what required my signature and returned to my garage. Jared had imagined hidden wealth meant hidden pleasure. In reality, most of it had been numbers I rarely looked at. Now those numbers had names attached to purposes. Tuition, tools, tuition fees, housing near trade schools, safety equipment. transportation for students who could not afford to reach apprenticeship sites. Samantha built safeguards so recipients were selected by an independent committee instead of by me. I wanted the fund to create opportunity, not another system where one person's favor determined another person's future. I also imposed a rule that made Samantha smile. No applicant would be required to write a tragic essay proving they had suffered enough to deserve help. Their circumstances mattered, but dignity mattered too. I had spent weeks being forced to perform helplessness so other people could justify controlling me. I did not want young people forced to perform pain for money. The fund would assess need, effort, and a practical plan. That was enough. The first budget included money for professional tools because I remembered what it meant to begin with borrowed equipment. My first torque wrench had belonged to a foreman who let me use it after hours on the condition that I returned it cleaner than I found it. I had spent years building a toolbox, one paycheck at a time. A talented student should not lose an apprenticeship because a required set of tools cost more than a month's rent. I authorized the expenditure without hesitation. That single signature felt nothing like the signatures Jared had tried to obtain from me. One transferred opportunity outward. The other had tried to take control inward. Same hand, same ink, completely different meaning. Samantha later asked whether the scholarship trust should receive the patent rights after my death or only a portion of the royalty income. I chose a structure that would eventually transfer most of the economic benefit while keeping licensing administration professional. I did not want a charitable fund making emotional business decisions, and I did not want future trustees using my wife's name as an excuse for sloppy management. If the design continued earning money after I was gone, it would keep opening doors. We reviewed the plan line by line at my kitchen table. There were no cameras in the range hood anymore. No one was zooming in on the documents. I could leave the papers spread out while I made coffee. That simple freedom still surprised me. At one point, Samantha looked around the room and asked whether I planned to move. The house held terrible memories now, she said, and the trust could provide any place I wanted. A smaller home, a condo with security, a house near the coast. I told her I was staying. Jared had wanted the house because he thought property could solve his life. I wanted it because my wife had planted tomatoes behind the garage, because the doorway still carried pencil marks from Jared's childhood height, because I knew which stair creaked in winter, and because leaving under pressure would let their plan alter one more decision. Staying was not stubbornness. It was continuity. I did make one change to the yard. I removed the old hedge beside the kitchen door that had hidden Natalie from the street when she entered with the copied key. In its place, I planted low herbs and flowers. The side path became visible from the sidewalk. It also became brighter. Security and beauty did not have to be opposites. Neighbors noticed. I was outside more often. Some had heard pieces of what happened, though I never explained the trust or the criminal details. A few apologized for believing Jared when he described me as forgetful. One admitted Jared had asked whether I ever seemed lost or confused near the mailbox. The neighbor had thought he was a worried son. I told him that was exactly why the plan had been dangerous. Most manipulation does not introduce itself as manipulation. It arrives carrying groceries. It labels drawers. It asks whether you remembered your pills. It gathers ordinary moments and changes their meaning. After that conversation, I stopped being angry at people who had nearly become accidental witnesses against me. Jared had designed the story to look reasonable from the outside. The responsibility belonged to the person who designed it. My independent physician continued checking me every few months, partly because I had normal blood pressure issues, and partly because I wanted a clean medical record after everything that happened. The first time the doctor asked whether I had experienced any recent confusion, we both laughed. Then I answered seriously, "No." My memory was fine. My sleep had improved. My blood pressure was steadier now that I was no longer taking mystery pills or waiting for my son to rearrange my life. The doctor told me chronic stress can imitate many of the symptoms families wrongly attribute to age. Poor sleep affects memory. Fear affects concentration. Medication side effects affect balance. I thought about how close Jared had come to creating a self-reinforcing trap. Drug a person, frighten him, deprive him of sleep, then point to his exhaustion as proof that he cannot function. That knowledge made the scholarship project feel connected to something larger. Independence is not merely money. It is access to tools, information, competent professionals, and people who do not benefit from declaring you helpless. I had sources. Many older people do not. So I added a second charitable allocation, smaller than the scholarship fund, but permanent for legal and medical assistance in elder exploitation cases. Samantha warned me that such programs could become complicated. I told her complicated did not mean unnecessary. We structured grants to established services rather than creating a new organization around my name. I did not want to become a public crusader. I did not want interviews. I did not want strangers recognizing me in grocery stores. Quiet help suited me better. The most important repairs are often the ones nobody sees after the machine starts running again. One evening, months after Thanksgiving, I opened the bedroom window to let in warm air. The ceiling above the door had a new smoke detector. I had installed it myself. Standard unit. No extra wires. No pinhole lens. I had checked twice anyway. The old detector sat on my workbench in the garage because police had returned it after the evidence process, and the case no longer required the physical device. The tiny black camera was still clipped inside the plastic housing, exactly where I had found it months earlier. Without power, the lens looked smaller than I remembered. I carried it into the house. For a moment I stood beneath the place where it had watched me sleep. That little object had seen everything Jared thought made me weak. It had watched me read in bed, forget nothing, grieve my wife when no one else was around, write numbers in my notebook, and sit awake after learning my son had betrayed me. Then once I knew it existed, it had watched a performance designed for the people on the other side. I twisted the old cover open one final time, pinched the camera between two fingers, and pulled its wire free. Then I dropped the camera into the trash. No ceremony, no speech. Just a piece of garbage going where it belonged. I walked to the cabinet above the refrigerator and took down a bottle of bourbon I had been saving for years. It was too expensive for the way I normally lived, a gift from an old licensing partner who once joked that I would probably use it to clean engine parts. I poured 2 fingers into a heavy glass. I carried it to the armchair by the living room window. The house was quiet. Not the anxious quiet of being watched. Not the staged quiet of pretending to be confused. Not the brittle quiet after Jared and Natalie left dinner believing they had poisoned my confidence. Real quiet. The kind you earn when nobody else is arranging your keys, your pills, your papers, or your future. I opened the leather notebook and turned to a blank page. For years, it had held investment notes, repair measurements, patent ideas, and fragments of thoughts I did not say aloud. I wrote one line. A man's dignity is not an inheritance his children get to spend. I closed the book. On the side table sat a letter from Samantha confirming the scholarship fund's next round of awards. My wife's name appeared at the top. Beneath it were the words, Educational Trust for Independent Futures. No mention of Jared. No mention of Natalie. No mention of the millions they had tried to reach. That was how I wanted it. People often imagine justice as the moment handcuffs close or a liar's face collapses when the truth appears. Those moments are loud, but they pass quickly. Justice for me was something quieter. It was taking my own medication without checking whether the pill had been switched. It was leaving my keys on the hook and finding them in the same place later. It was sleeping under a ceiling that contained nothing but a smoke detector. It was knowing that my son had tried to turn age into a weapon against me and had failed because I surrender my own reality. I took a sip of bourbon and watched evening settle over the street. Somewhere beyond that quiet neighborhood, Jared and Natalie were dealing with lawyers' debts and consequences no hidden camera could solve. I did not celebrate their fear. I did not need to. The point had never been to destroy them. The point was to stop them from destroying me. For most of my life, when a machine failed, I repaired it. I replaced worn bearings, straightened bent shafts, traced faulty circuits, and returned broken systems to service. Family had taught me a harder lesson. Not everything broken should be repaired by the person it injured. Sometimes the only repair you can make is to remove the damaged part from the system and protect what still works. I looked around the room my son had planned to take from me and felt no victory, only ownership of myself. Then I turned off the lamp, carried my glass to the kitchen, and went upstairs without checking the ceiling.